Shalom, Yasher Allah. First and foremost, I would like to give all glory, honor, and infinite praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Chachadash. Double honors to beloved elders and the apostles at Great Millstone that taught me this truth. Peace and salutations to you, hopeful elect Akim out there laboring, that are pushing this word in truth and in sincerity. This is your brother Amar from the GMS Boise, Idaho camp, and I'm coming at you with this lesson, based on a few news article headlines that I had read online. I'm going to read them both. And then I'm going to read, Isaiah 19, go into, the first, roughly like 7, 8, 9 verses, in Isaiah 19, because that's what we're seeing right now. People are stressed out. People are starting to see that they're losing their houses. They're unable to pay the bills. Grocery prices are tremendous. Things are really starting to tighten down. People aren't taking vacations. There's not a vacation season like there used to be. Even this recent round of holidays, during the Christmas time, so-called, people weren't in that spirit. I didn't see that many houses decorated up with lights like you used to when you were a kid. You have a lot of people not getting excited about sports because it's rigged. You got people not trusting the news because they're realizing that it's controlled, by the little hats and small noses. You have people protesting in the streets damn near every other month for something outrageous that happens, in this country and many countries around the world, because the time of the end of the world is coming very rapidly. The end of the world started 2,000 years ago when Yahushai gave himself for the Israelites on the cross for mercy unto the Israelites, for them to have the window of grace and allowing repentance to come back to Yahweh Yahushai, in the form of, repenting, and living your life to the best of your ability under the law, statutes, and commandments in these last days in this wicked world. Not, understanding that it's not going to be able to save you just because you follow the laws to the best of your ability, but through the mercy and grace and gift that Yahushua has given the elect, the small remnant, the 1/3 that are going to receive salvation in the first go round. That's what we're preaching, teaching, focusing on. But the prophecy that I want to focus on today, is the fact that Egypt versus Egypt is happening right now. You have never seen, Edomites more divided, than we see them today. We see the left versus the right. Either you have to be extremely so-called racist, or you have to be extremely so-called liberal to the point where you don't care if somebody's pronouns are one thing. You have to refer to them as a fucking dog if that's their pronoun. If they walk around with a dog mask all day and a tail strapped to them, then they have to refer to as a dog. Or you have the right side of it, so-called, the conservative and liberal, that you have them gun-toting, grabbing up anybody darker than a paper bag that's not a native, so-called, or a citizen to this country, So the great division among Esau is more than ever. And what you have on top of that is financial burdens. And financial burdens and the American dream is something that is really, affecting these Babylonians, because their dollar is not stretching like it used to. And you can see that with the current silver per ounce prices, gold prices, as well as the numbers that are coming out on the financial market, which, me speaking as a man, I believe that a lot of these bankruptcies that are happening, a lot of these home foreclosures and bank seizures of homes are actually happening because these fucking ICE agents are grabbing so much Issacharites in Northern Kingdom that have actually bought and paid for their homes here in Babylon the Great, or in the process of finishing off their payments, got snatched up on their way to fucking work, and they with the breakfast still on the table, whatever, and got thrown into the back of a van, and what they knew, missing a couple of payments in Babylon the Great, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, your house now belongs to the bank. Your car already towed away. Your credit card's canceled because there's no activity. Your phone bill, no line of reconnecting with your contacts, whatever it is. So a lot of these judgments have been taken upon the Israelites because they're the ones that actually still believing in the American dream. These fucking Edomites have done past and paid off their houses, passed on their old houses to their kids. Their kids have sold it, bought a few more houses. So Esau is good, but Esau is still stressing, in the sense of, how much things have changed from even 10, 15, 20 years ago. But this is the article. This is the number of Americans filing for bankruptcy continues to accelerate, and it's going to continue to accelerate all the way till the collapse. The price of food, like I said, the cost of living in Babylon the Great. You have a lot of Babylonians leaving the country, But I'm going to read this one. This is the banks seize 367,000 homes as housing pain spreads across U.S. And it is about to get much worse. That's right, because you have a lot of these economists that are talking about a lot of these jobs are going to face future mass layoffs, which is correct. These jobs that people depend on are going to be, absorbed through AI, as well as, different, let's say manual labor. Let's say you work manual labor, right? Like construction. That's only going to go as long as the banks are still approving loans, as long as the banks are still giving lines of credit to certain businesses. But when you have businesses filing for bankruptcy, etc., those construction projects don't happen. Building projects get delayed, bridges get delayed. So the point being is that a lot of these jobs are going to disappear. And this is just the statistics of a few headlines that are circulating online, but everybody knows this is happening right now. So now I'm going to get into the scriptures. Enough rambling, enough talking about what's going on in the world, because we know that this is the end. This is Isaiah 19:1, the burden of Egypt, behold. And this is, Isaiah 19, this actually happened in Egypt, but for the context, this is what is also applicable in this modern time. Isaiah 19:1, the burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord Yahweh rideth upon a swift cloud, which is a large chariot. Large is an understatement, humongous, size of the whole, bigger than the earth type chariot, and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it. And we know that ultimately did happen, when Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai went down and, fucked them Egyptians up. But this is a promise as well as to how the Lord is going to ultimately put judgment on these modern day Egyptians, Romans, Grecians, as well as these damn heathens that got us in captivity, aka Egypt. Verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. Ultimately, this is a code for civil war. You have Esau infighting amongst himself with the situation, what's going on in Greenland. You have Esau fighting, amongst himself with the politics here in Babylon the Great. No one can agree on the same single topic. There's so many different. That's why Babylon the Great is literally called Babylon. Babal is confusion. Babylon the Great is great confusion. So many different cultures and mixing pots of people's ideologies that just comes into a big mix of fucking slop. Confusion. Verse 3, and the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof. That patriotic gun-ho, this is America, goddammit type spirit is dead. And I will destroy the counsel thereof, and they shall seek to the idols and to the charmers and to them that have familiar spirits and to the wizards. Ultimately Esau is going to try to run that left-handed side, through his magi's, his astrologers, his rabbis that do the sacrifices that are in touch with the left-handed side, top masons. He's going to call everybody and no one's going to give him answers. Verse 4, and the Egyptians will I give over will I give over into the hand of a cruel Lord. This is Nero 47 that we're dealing with right now. And a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashim Yahushai, the Lord Yahweh of hosts. As you can see, that's what we're dealing with right now. This cruel Lord is making life harder for everybody, and with the promises of a big, beautiful bill that's making everybody broke, but making the oil companies and the rich elite way more richer. Verse 5, and the waters shall fail from the sea, and the river shall be wasted and dried up. Man, the water shall fail from the sea. That's these different currents that different fish populations are dependent on for the fishers to get their fish. The rivers being dried up, obviously. River is a very huge life source for drinking water, food, etc. Verse 6, and they shall turn the rivers far away, and the brooks of defense shall be emptied and dried up. The reeds and the flags shall wither. Man, the reeds and the flags, those are plants like cattails that are right next to rivers. Because even in the drought, or even let's say you're in a desert, there's still vegetation along the riverbank because it's right next to the river that's constantly running. So those plants are always alive. But it's saying that even those plants are going to die. Verse 7, the paper reeds by the brooks, by the mouth of the brooks, and that's like the most fertile area. The mouth of the brooks, that's like a delta where all the sediment and plants can just go wild. So what's going to cause this? And everything sown by the brooks shall wither, be driven away and be no more. Could be a chemical spill, nuclear destruction, the Lord sending, just a famine of no rain. Ultimately the point being is that, this is talking about the Nile River, getting dried up, because this is a prophecy against Egypt. Because imagine you're an Egyptian in the ancient world, hearing that your Nile brooks, your reeds and everything that you because the reeds they used to make boats, they used to build their roofs on their houses, baskets, all types of things. So imagine a whole way of their life being taken from them. That's an analogy of what's going to be happening today in this modern sense. Verse 8, the fishers also shall mourn, and all they that cast angle. All they that cast angle, that's talking about your different lures. Today you would call them a bobber. Fly fishing, how it has a little piece of bait at the end of the hook. That's talking about, hey man, they ain't catching shit. Verse 8 again, the fishers also shall mourn, and all they that cast angle into the brooks shall lament. And they that spread nets upon the waters shall languish. The fishermen, because the fisherman in the ancient world was, a man that was really, let's say wealthy because he was out there, fishing. Some of the apostles were fishermen, and it was a good trade, to be a fisherman in the ancient world. So the fact that it's saying that these top echelon of tradesmen are suffering, that what is everybody else doing? They're suffering too. This is verse 9. Moreover, they that work in fine flax and they that weave networks shall be confounded. And if you know something about linen is made from the flax. So it's talking about even the people that, depend on the flaxseed to even make clothing. The whole fucking supply chain, which is a representation of the supply chain, is going to be disturbed. You're not going to have these factories. You're not going to have China. You already have China shutting off rare earth minerals imports into Babylon the Great. You have a lot of these semiconductor chip plants that are only going to be, servicing certain countries. So the supply chain ultimately is going to be broken. So let me read that again, because someone weaving is someone is like a craftsman. This is Isaiah 19:9. Moreover, they that work in fine flax, Salakia, and they that weave networks shall be confounded. If you ever seen one of the ancient ways that they make linen, it's a very complex process. There's a lot of steps. You got to break up the weaves of the different what do you call it? The reeds, because flax is like a really tall grass. So what they do is they break it up, all the reeds, and then they start to weave it through how do you say, like a brush comb, like that you would brush your hair with a fine comb. And then what they do is they take those fibers and they wrap it around a wheel, and they constantly turn that wheel, and it tangles together, and then you ultimately get a really fine thread. And then they take that thread and they weave it through um, different twines to make different sizes, and then they make whatever clothing that they have, which you need the reeds, and the reeds need the of the grass need the water, and the water needs to be there. You have to have workers to harvest all the different flax, in different bushels, and they bundle them up, set them to the side. So again, the point being is that the supply chain is going to get messed up, because having clothing like that it was a really big trade in the ancient world, especially if you knew how to do it. you know so again, this is Isaiah 19:10. And they shall be broken in the purposes thereof, all that make sluices and ponds for fish. And the sluices and ponds for fish is like different canal chambers that you use to set in the river, so that when you set it in the river, the fish swim into it, and then you get a big old bucket of fish. You don't even have to really fish. It's like a little fish trap. That's what that's talking about. Again, someone who makes ponds for the fish, that diverts fish. And then they because in the ancient world you would catch fish in baskets, and then they would have separate ponds that they would put those fish in, and they would constantly have fish that they wouldn't have to really take much effort to go out and catch, because they would already have them in ponds. That's where you get these fucking rich people that they're called bass ponds in the back of their houses, that they get refilled by trucks or whatever. They drop a whole bunch of, like, let's say 100 or 500 fish in this big white rich man's pond. So all he does when he goes and catches his lure, he gets a fish instantly. So again, that's what's going to happen in this world. So you have to really understand what the ancient sayings were. You have to know certain things about customs and cultures, and the way that processes were done in the ancient world. Call Allah Yahweh Bashim Yao Shai. Through the years of just studying, watching the brothers, and learning different things and remembering different things, that's how I have been, come across knowing all this, staying, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Yao Shai, first and foremost. So it is a lot of information, but the point that the scriptures are so poetic, because it goes into detail about ancient examples of what people were dealing with, and what's going to happen when a famine comes, and what the supply chain is going to get messed up, to what's going on exactly right now. And so, call Allah Yahweh Bashim Yao Shai that this book is living, because we can see that what's the scriptures are talking about are happening in our daily lives. And we can always revert back to the scrolls, which are the light and lamp of the feet of the righteous, roughly paraphrasing. Because this is what we use to, gauge what's going on in the world. Test whether things are right or wrong. Understand why things are happening. Because if you don't have the Bible, you don't have a thorough understanding of the scriptures, you are going to be lost in this world. And that's point blank, period. And all these anxieties of bankruptcies and foreclosures and stuff, if you don't have the scriptures, your dumbass is actually going to be fucking worried about something like that. You're going to be worried about a fucking house, a car payment, man. You should be worried about salvation, and not getting caught up in Esau's traps, and not taking the mark of the beast, man. That's what your ass should be fucking worried about right now. Getting right with Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, but you got these people worried about car loans and shit, thinking that the world's ending because they lost their fucking SRT Hellcat, their fucking nice 6-bedroom house that they don't even got no fucking kids in. It's just them and their wife, him and his wife, big ass empty house. For what? Nothing, man. So that's why, hey man, we're gonna go back to that tribal instinct, because the only reason why you need a big ass house is if you have a big ass family, if you have a means to support them. But you have these Americans always wanting more than what they need, man. Greedy. And they're suffering the consequences of their dumbass fucking credit card bad spending, man. So Jake, understand the situation that we're in. Don't get caught up in the stresses of this world. Yahweh Bashim Yao Shai is going to provide your daily bread, and that's something you have to believe. You know, so while the rest of the world and these Edomites are going crazy because their kingdom is collapsing, you should be rejoicing. You should be getting elevated in the spirit. When you go in the store and you see people stressed out, you should be happy. Because call halal Yahweh Bashim Yashai. People are feeling what the Israelites have been feeling their whole damn existence, you know, being under the curses. So don't feel bad for these damn Edomites because they're losing their country. If you do, man, you got some self-reflecting to do if you feel bad for a fucking Edomite because he's losing the good old America he used to know. Soft ass. But Lord willing that this lesson was edifying unto the elect, because we are living in those last days, man. So get right or get left, and Lord willing that this lesson was edifying unto the elect. Till next time, I would like to give all glory, honor, and infinite praises to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Chodash, and double honors to the beloved elders and the apostles at Great Millstone that taught me this truth. And peace and salutations to all you hopeful elect Akim out there laboring, that are pushing this word in truth and in sincerity, risking your lives and your freedom, especially in these last days, to do so. Till next time, Lord willing, Shalom.